Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our monthly Q&A webinar. My name is Avalon Powell, and I am the Event and Marketing Coordinator for Plateau. I'll be assisting Tim Milligan today with moderating your questions submitted during the live Q&A portion of our webinar. We'll begin by addressing questions that were pre-submitted, and then we'll open it up to your questions during the last half of our presentation today. You can submit your questions in a couple of ways. First, if you scroll over the Zoom screen, you should see at the very bottom there is a toolbar and an option for Q&A. If you click that, it should open up a pop-up box where you can type in your questions directly. The second option is on that same toolbar, you should see a chat. And if you click that as well, it should open up a separate pop-up box that you can just type your questions in. So remember, we will be addressing those last at the end. You're welcome to submit them as we go, and we'll be sure to get to those. And lastly, we will be recording this webinar and sending a follow-up email after this event. If we were not able to address your questions during this webinar today, feel free to respond directly to that follow-up email, and we'll be sure to get you an answer. So without further ado, Tim, you can take it away.
Thank you, Avalon, and thank you everyone for being here. Hopefully you're seeing the PowerPoint, the presentation on the screen. Thank you, Avalon, for helping put these things together and for putting these questions on here. We'll run through a brief little presentation here. It won't take long, and then we'll get to everyone's questions. A big part of this are some pre-submitted questions that came from our landowners. This is me. Obviously, you're seeing me on the screen. We used to not do the video, so I always wanted to put a picture of me up there. But that's me, and my name's Tim Milligan. I'm the sales manager here at Plateau Landowner Services, work in that department where we work with landowners, helping them make the transition from ag to wildlife, and then working with our current landowners, which is all of y'all who've been invited to this thing. This is something that we're doing strictly, primarily for our landowners, folks that are involved in wildlife management and have worked with us, and maybe we did, your wildlife management plan and helped you get into it. Feel strongly that we try to be available as much as we can. Sometimes it's not easy to find the person that you need to talk to. And this is just one more, especially during this time, it's one more way we can try to be available. I've been with the company for quite a while, 12 or 13 years now, I guess. I'll tell you a little bit about myself real quick as we get started, just so you know kind of who's talking to you. I started with the company as a technician, treating fire ants, filling feeders, doing all the fun stuff that we get to do on landowners' properties, where we're helping them maintain their activities and doing the wildlife activities on various properties. And a lot of landowners, take advantage of that and trust us to do that. And we appreciate them doing that. Moved kind of through those ranks and worked as an account manager or a salesperson here, and, doing presentations across the state and doing our seminar series, which we normally do in the fall and winter. And this year we're going to be doing webinars in the fall. So I hope everyone will come back and join us for those. They're all up on the website, thanks to Avalon. I am also, so that's a little bit about me at Plateau. Work with everyone here. The knowledge that I have, I'll be straight up, I'm not a biologist. I started to put that on my card one time, Tim, not a biologist, Milligan, because I don't like people assuming that I know more than I do. I've got a bunch of smart people that I work with. A bunch of our biologists are the ones that have this valuable information. The answers that I'll give you will either be from my own experiences, from experiences of our landowners, or from the information that's been shared with me and that I've learned from our biologists. That's how I learned about all this stuff. I didn't know anything about wildlife management before I came to work at Plateau. My family, we are landowners. We've had property outside Austin and Travis County for decades. We were cattle producers, technically for a while. That was our ag use anyway. We weren't, producers necessarily. We did produce calves and we did what we needed to do, but it was mainly for the property tax valuation. It was a hobby. It was something that we did. We loved doing. Grew up, my father and I and my brother, baling hay, planting oats, raising cattle, doing all that kind of good stuff as our ag use. Then when things changed, once my dad passed away and I had moved to Houston, he's in New Mexico, it got a little more difficult for us to maintain ag, and we ended up needing to get a cattle tenant. And my mom was here by herself, having to deal with, different things at the ranch between renters and cattle tenants and all this other kind of stuff. That all changed. And so we started looking at options, and we decided to do this when it became necessary for us to do it. And I think that's a process a lot of people go through. So a lot of you have gone through that same process of making that decision. So I've been in wildlife on my property for, I guess, roughly 7 years now. I've been doing all these activities and going through the same stresses and the same joys and rewards that y'all have. So that's where my experiences, I feel like, come in handy, and I can share those with you as we go. But that's a little about me. I'm a landowner. I'm in wildlife too. That's why I feel strongly about trying to share this information, because I know a lot of the questions I had and still have are some of the same questions y'all do. So I enjoy answering these. Let's see if I can get this PowerPoint to let me move forward here. Here we go. So first question, a lot of folks have, and there's some of you that have been in wildlife for a long time. There's some people that in this audience that haven't been in wildlife very long. Maybe you just got a wildlife management plan from us last year or this year. And there's others who are in Ecolab right now and thinking about transitioning into wildlife. And the question comes up as soon as I did it. My sisters and brothers, that's the first question they were, what do we get ourselves into? What is this all about? They didn't understand any of it. I did, because I'd worked here, but what did I get myself into? And that's what I think a lot of people think about is, what am I supposed to do? What are the requirements, and how is this thing going to actually work on my property? So what do I do now? Now that I'm in wildlife management, what do I do now? And everybody talks about these wildlife management activities. That's the thing you hear all the time. What are these activities you're supposed to do? You're supposed to be active in your management. Wildlife, that's the thing. If you don't remember anything, remember that wildlife management is activity-based. It's not results-based. So you don't have to be good at it. You just have to do it. You have to do the activities. You have to maintain those activities, or someone has to do them. It's where a lot of people hire us or hire someone else to do their activities, just like mowing your yard. If you want to do it yourself and you have time to do it yourself, you do it yourself. If not, you can hire someone else to do it. But what you do now is get started on those activities. Okay, so I always think about my mom, and there's a little comedy skit I saw one time. Always think about this: her telling us to go outside and come up with a good activity. Just go outside and do something fun. Get out of my hair, go outside and come up with an activity. Don't come back until you're through with whatever that activity was. And I remember thinking, activity, well, what's a good activity? I don't know what a good activity is. We might, we were kids, lived on, around a creek in Austin, and there's no telling what we might get into. And so I think about my kids. I think about me out playing in the mud, or, taking a skateboard off a ramp and breaking, busting my head open. Is that a good activity? I don't know necessarily what a good activity is. And I think that's what struck me, I guess, as I got into wildlife management. What is a good activity? What exactly is a good activity? And this thought struck me the other day when it comes to wildlife management, because I think about this with a lot of the things that I do on my property, is that if you feel good about it, if you feel like it's benefiting the wildlife on your property and benefiting your land in some way, then it's probably a good activity. There are a lot of things that you're already doing, a lot of things that landowners are already doing on their property that are qualifying activities. But if you can feel comfortable that if I show that to someone, if I told somebody I was doing this and I feel like it's benefiting my property. I remember talking to the Travis County Appraisal District appraiser this year, and she and I talking about the activities that I was doing on my property, and her saying that, the things you're doing, the fact that you have a story to tell about them and how they're benefiting your property, that says a lot. So I felt good about that. I felt good about the activities that I was doing. There are requirements for each of these activities. There are minimum amounts that you have to do. Those are the things that are in your plan and the things that you can call us about to make sure you're getting enough of it done. But the bottom line is that if it feels good, it's probably good for your property, and it probably is if you feel good about it, it's probably a good activity. So about the activity, the minimum requirements. There's these activity categories. We're going to run through this real quick, and so we can get to the questions. But you all know, and hopefully you've got a wildlife management plan, and we can always provide more examples of all these activities. If you have questions, you don't necessarily have to do exactly what's in your plan. That was what you and the biologist talked about. But sometimes you make changes. As long as you're falling into these categories, and it's an activity that falls into one of these categories, you pick a minimum of 3 of those, and you do one thing in each of those categories. You can't do 3 habitat control activities and call that done. You can't do 3 food activities and call that done. It's got to be 3 things in 3 different, or 1 thing in 3 different categories. And that, again, is the minimum. We'll never tell you to do the minimum. One of the things that is my saving grace, I feel like, is that we do 5 or 6 different activities every year on our property. They're not difficult to do. They don't take up a whole lot of time. And of course, with a lot of it, you can get help if you need it. But if you're doing more than a minimum, you are under less scrutiny. You help that appraiser understand that, okay, this person is not just trying to get away with something, or not just trying to do the minimum. When they look at those reports or they look at, your property and what you're doing, if they feel comfortable that you're doing this for the right reasons and you're doing more than the minimum, you'll never run into problems. It's the folks that really hang around that minimum, because then if something terrible happens, maybe you didn't get around to treating the fire ants, or maybe some nest boxes fell off the tree. The last thing I'm going to do is lose my ag exemption because 3 nest boxes fell off a tree during a storm. And the county says you didn't have the proper number up there and all you were doing were 3 activities. So I have these backup activities that I be sure and do. So look through your plan, call us for guidance, and ask us about those questions. You're not alone in this. And I'll go through that. I'll mention that a few times. That's why we're doing this. That's why I'm sitting here. That's why Avalon's here. We want to make sure you know that when you got into this with Plateau, you're not alone. We're still here. Not everyone thinks to call us all the time. So we try to, find different ways to be available. Your wildlife management plan has a lot of good information from your biologist. So they met with you, they talked to you about what you're going to do on your property, they talked to you about the different activities that were available, and your plan has these features in it that help guide you through that. This is just an example of it. This is a map that tells you, a document that gives you the right time of year to do certain activities, whether it's surveys or erosion control or predator control, habitat control. We have a lot of questions sometimes about when's the right time to do chemical brush management. When do I treat cactus? When do I treat mesquite? When should I do strip mowing? When should I plant things? And so this calendar is designed to kind of give you some basic answers, but then you can call us, call your biologist, call your rep, and ask them, I'm fixing to do this. What's the best time for me to go about doing that? So while this is a great tool and it's in there, I also understand that even when I look at this, it's kind of daunting sometimes. Okay, that's a lot of information. If I know exactly what I'm looking for, but if I'm just trying to get a general idea of what's the best time to do things, the easiest thing to do is just call us and let us try to help you. But those things are in there. And then the log sheets as far as documentation. So when I mentioned earlier that wildlife management is activity-based and not results-based, that's the important thing, is that you document that activity, that you keep some records of what you're doing. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, but always remember that we can help you with documentation. We can help you with log sheets like this to use. We can give you examples of different types of documentation. Photos are, of course, a great method of documentation. You'll see some photos, some representative photos in here in a little bit. Whenever you're doing an activity that you think is something that would qualify you for wildlife management, I would take a picture. Whenever we fill our feeder, I take a picture of my kids treating fire ants or fixing feeders or whatever it's doing. Not every time, but when I'm actually trying to document something that I think I'm going to show the appraisal district. So we can help you with documentation. We have services that can help you with all that stuff as well. So we'll talk about some more of that in a minute. So then again, remember we're here. Plateau, we're a resource for you. There's a resources page on our website. Our website in general is designed to be a resource for landowners, for all of you. This phone number right here, it will get you to anyone you need to, whoever picks up that phone can find you the help you need. You know me, you've got a biologist that's in your plan, your sales rep here, your region manager, Cameron Bain at the office. Any of us can answer questions for you and help you. And then the links that are on here that Avalon was nice enough to put on here. If you need help, our products and services, they're designed to make wildlife management easier for folks. So that's kind of our plug. There's a website, there's the products and services stuff. You know how to get back to it if you want to use it, if you need it. So now we get to the fun part, the landowner submitted questions. This is the part that I look forward to every month. We may have to start doing this thing more often because I enjoy it so much, but we'll get to y'all's questions and we'll take some questions as well. These are some of the ones that were submitted up front. We may not get to all the questions right now, but we're going to try. And if we don't, or if you have specific questions, my email will be on here at the end, and you can certainly send me an email that's just, if it's specific to your property, or you remember it after we're done, feel free to reach out to me anytime. So the first one, if ag can transfer to wildlife management, can wildlife transfer to ag? That's a great question. Yes, absolutely. We've gone back and forth, once at least on our property. We decided we were going to graze it for a little while full time. I have a landowner that I work with in Blanco County. She's got a property. She has a man who lives on her property who is incredible with goats and sheep and can make a lot of money in that market when the time is right. She has her place in wildlife management and it recovers and it's absolutely beautiful. But at the right time, when the market's right, they bring in an unbelievable number of sheep and goats. And they will eat that place down to, to where it looks almost like a parking lot, but they do it very quickly and they get them off, after a period of time. But during that time, they move it back into traditional ag. It's because it's a full-time grazing operation. It's not wildlife with a few animals. That's what I'm doing right now. I've got wildlife on my property, but we run a cow or two, a few cows every once in a while, that kind of thing. But technically, my primary use is still wildlife management. So the switch back and forth is not difficult. It's a matter of filing an application for traditional ag. We can help you with that. We don't charge very much to do it. It's a real, a pretty simple transition to go to say, okay, I've been in wildlife, and now I want, maybe you've got a cattle tenant that now that you've got a bunch of grass, they're willing to pay you a bunch of money. But before you do that, I would suggest, talking with us, because I can do that on my property without moving out of wildlife management. That way, like this, the nice lady in Blanco, when it does get to a point that she wants to move back to wildlife, we have to refile everything again, because she goes to such, it's kind of an extreme, but it's a different reasoning for her. But yes, so the other, I think a lot of times the reason this question comes up, and I don't know if that's the case here, but people are thinking about what happens if someone wants to buy my property. So that's a concern for us. If a guy comes along and wants to buy my property and decides he wants to put cows on it, that's fine. He can put cows on it. It's in wildlife now. Wildlife is technically just a form of ag. It's an alternative ag use. So I'm managing wildlife instead of baling hay. I mean, that's basically as simple as it's put. It's no different really than telling the county that I'm running cows and now I'm going to switch to running goats. So the switchback is not difficult. It's something that a lot of people do, especially when a property is sold. The nice thing about it, if you're thinking about potentially selling a property, and if you're a realtor listening to this, is that properties in wildlife are open to two different types of buyers. Most people look at a property that's got cows on it and they think, okay, I got to run cows. They may not think about the wildlife management part. If a property's in wildlife, it kind of makes it easier for a realtor to say, you know what, you can keep it in wildlife. It's already there. You don't have to worry about that whole process. It's a little simpler once you buy a property that's already in wildlife. Or if you want to put cows on it or run horses full time, that kind of thing, or bale hay or whatever you want to do, you can do that. So hopefully that answered that question. That's a good one. I like that question. It's great. I forget that Avalon's got these great pictures on here, but they're, perfect example. I mean, you can go from wildlife to having some cows, or you can have a big place like this and have a few cows on it, and they're not your primary use, and you can still be in wildlife and run a few cows. So again, that's something that you can consult with one of our biologists about. We do flash grazing. The grazing on my property is one of my wildlife management activities. It's actually, we bring the cows in to let them graze, let them eat down some of that old grass, and that's a productive wildlife activity. I take photos while they're there, document the time that they're there, and that's like mowing. So it's a productive thing for my property. So here's a good question. What brand of fire ant treatment do you recommend for landowners to use? I'm going to remember to go to the picture. So what brand of fire ant treatment? I added a picture, Avalon, just because I found a picture of the extinguished bag. I don't know if y'all can copy this link or if it actually works. I think the link would actually work if you clicked on it. But if not, write that link down. Write that link down that's on the bottom. There's those nasty fire ants up there up top. We don't like those things. Imported red fire ants are what you want to treat. This page from Texas A&M University gives a lot of good information about how to use this bait. It's the method that we use. It's a spot treatment, an individual mound treatment. You don't want to just broadcast fire ant bait everywhere, because then you're going to be hitting your good ants, the big red harvester ants, which are good quail food and good horny toad food, and they compete with fire ants. The more of those big harvester ants you have, the fewer fire ants you'll actually have, because they compete for the same food sources. And they're actually native fire ants. I think I mentioned I started as a technician treating fire ants here. My first job with the company was as a temporary fire ant technician, treating fire ants on a temporary basis to handle the load of the people. This extinguished fire ant bait is what we use, Extinguish Plus. You can find it on Amazon. I think you can get it at some Tractor Supplies and some other stores, but that's what we use. But a lot of people don't want to necessarily do fire ant treatment to the extreme that it needs to be done, or they don't want to document it. They don't want to, for it to be a qualifying activity, you have to document that you did it and that you did a certain amount on your property, that kind of thing. We know all that. And so when we go out and treat fire ants, we are very careful about, marking waypoints and taking photos and documenting that we did the absolute proper amount. So we do that for folks as part of their service agreement sometimes, where we're doing their services, or you can go out there and treat them yourself. There's no requirement that you use that, but that's a type of bait we use. And again, that link will provide you with some great methods. Hopefully you've had time to write it down. If not, it's in here if you want to refer back to the webinar. So I hope that helps and answers that question. So the next question, let's see. When cleaning nest boxes, should we use any type of disinfectant or apply anything to discourage wasps or other unwanted insects such as mites from moving in? So that's a good question too. There's one of our guys checking a nest box right there. That's the patented method for checking a nest box is, walking up, opening that door and seeing what's in there. You mentioned wasp, and as I'm looking at this picture, you'll notice that thing is about head high for him. It's not 10 feet or 15 feet up in a tree. When we hang nest boxes, and these nest boxes, they're for small, songbirds, that kind of thing. They don't need to be hung. I went to a guy's property one time, and he had them all to where he basically had to put a ladder up there in order to get to them. I don't do that, because the idea is if it does have wasp in it, you want to know before you open that door. So get them up there where they're about head high to where you can look in that little window in the front. You can look in that hole and you can see if there are wasps in there. You can tap on the box and see if something's in there that you don't want to mess with, kind of thing. Don't put them so high that you have to climb on a ladder, and then if a bunch of wasps bail out of it, you're scrambling down off of a ladder. I've been there. Trust me, it's not fun. To the question about disinfectant, when we do these, again, as a technician, did a whole lot of this. Normally our first response, if there were wasps in them, we'd take a stick and try to knock the nest out without using any kind of spray or anything else. We had some spray that we used on occasion, and there's nothing wrong with it. During the right time of year, you're basically checking these birdhouses during the late summer, winter time, when the birds aren't really using them. So spraying wasp and knocking out the nest, that kind of thing with wasp spray is not gonna harm the birds. That stuff's gonna go away over time. You don't necessarily need to treat them periodically to keep anything out of them. You just need to check them during that time. If you check them in the winter, that's when you knock the wasp out. And usually during the winter, they're a little more docile. It's cold, so the wasps are in there and they're kind of hibernating almost. And you knock them out and then knock the nest out, and they don't come back. By that time, in the spring, that way you've cleaned all that out and the birds can get to them. But if you are going to use stuff, there are organic wasp sprays that you can use. We use one that was citrus based. But normally it was just a matter of, opening up that door if we could and knocking that nest out with a long stick or something like that to get the wasp to get away. So, try not to use, poisons and things like that in the nest boxes. But again, if you're doing it during that time of year when birds aren't really using them, you're not really going to hurt anything. So a couple more questions that came to mind, asked by some folks a while back. And this is one that it rang true to me. I needed to hear this. What if I'm behind on my activities? Don't do that. It's not necessary. You can get behind on your activities. I feel like I'm behind on my activities right now. I think a lot of us feel like we're behind on a lot of things. You don't need to panic. It's nice thing is right now you're in the middle of the year. Being behind on your activities just means that you've had other things to do. You've got other priorities. Just don't stay behind. Ask us for help. A lot of folks right now, we're still doing service agreements for this year where people are coming in going, I intended to do all this stuff myself, but I know I'm not going to be able to get to it because of all this stuff that's going on, and work has changed and things have changed, or my life has changed a little bit. So can you help me with my activities? And we can put together a service agreement where we bill quarterly type of thing, and we can handle those activities to get you through the year to where you don't stay behind. Falling behind is not a bad thing. Staying behind is not good. You don't want to have to answer this question in December, or certainly not in next January when it's too late to get caught up. But you don't need to panic. A lot of times that's the first response is, oh my gosh, I haven't done this stuff. Think it through, look at your plan, call us and ask us for help. Ask us. There are activities you can do to get caught up that aren't terribly difficult. There are activities that we can do for you, like fire ant treatment. Bird surveys are a great activity that we can do in a single day that covers a census activity, that kind of thing. One of the smartest things you can do is sign up for an annual report with us. I'll talk about those in a second, but have us do your annual report, because then we're watching and kind of paying attention to your activities through the year. And if you're not sending us any documentation, we kind of get this idea that, okay, maybe you're not doing anything, and we'll remind you. We'll make sure you don't fall too far behind. But don't panic. It's not the end of the world. It's not a great place to be in. But like I said, I'm behind right now myself. It's not, I'm going to get caught up. I'm going to go out there this weekend, and I've got some other stuff going on, but I've got some friends that are going to help me as well. So, and my son and daughter are now, they're going back to school where they were doing the activities for me. Now they're going to be back in school, but they'll still be able to help, and we'll still be able to get what we feel is like a good amount done before the end of the year. So, this question's a great one, because I think it applies to everyone. Not every appraisal district asks for an annual report, but most of them now are doing that, and you should do one regardless, and I'll explain why. But the question was, my appraisal district asked me for an annual report. what is that and why do I have to do it? Was the first question. And then, am I supposed to refile this plan every year? So a lot of people get those two confused, the annual report and an update of your plan. A lot of appraisal districts sometimes will get those confused as well. They'll send a letter that makes it, that kind of looks like they're asking for a refile or an update of your plan when they're really asking for an annual report. They're asking for a report of your activities. Most appraisal districts will ask you for a report of the activities that you did. What did you do this year? And for me, that report is the difference between these two signs. It's a difference between whether I need to, when they ask, whether I'm going to panic or whether I'm going to be calm. Whether they ask for it or not right now, they can. They can always ask you for a report of the activities that you did. The best shape to be in is where you have those activities documented to where when they do ask, you don't have to panic. You don't have to go back and start looking for things that you did a year ago or 2 years ago. Burnett County, for instance, is asked at certain times. They'll go back 3 years and ask for 3 years of annual reports. Some counties will ask for 2 years, the prior years and this year's. Most counties will ask on an annual basis. But if they'll send that letter oftentimes at the end of the year, and sometimes even after the end of the year, and at that time it's too late to get caught up, and so a lot of folks will panic because they haven't been keeping that documentation throughout the year. So the smartest thing to do is keep that documentation throughout the year. If they request an annual report, you do have to do it, but it is just it's a record of the activities that you did on your property. It's no different than showing a friend of yours everything that you did on their property that year. They're not out to get anyone. They just have to have some way of substantiating why they gave you your ag exemption. So they'll ask for that report. And oftentimes most of the time, it's the only thing the appraisal district will ever see that tells them what you did. So it's that important. It's something that reassures them that you're doing what you said you were going to do. And doing it every year, regardless of whether they ask. This is what was interesting for me. So I did my annual report this year. Long story. I got behind on that. I had to catch up. Actually ran into an issue where I didn't turn it in on time. It's not a good thing, but I'm just being honest with y'all. It happens to me too. Don't let it happen to you if you don't have to, but it takes some scrambling to get caught back up. But I was busy worrying about other things and let that get away from me. But I had done annual reports for the previous 5 years, and the county had seen all those. They ask for one every year, and I know they do, but they'd seen all those, so they knew that I was doing my activities. It wasn't a matter of, hey, Tim, we don't think you're doing what you're supposed to do. It's, hey, Tim, you didn't turn it in on time. Please send it in to us and make sure it's complete. It wasn't that big of a deal. And I was able to go back and look at those prior year's annual reports to help me put together the new one, to remember, kind of what I'd done in the past, and really help me, kind of get something out of my wildlife management plan. So those prior year's annual reports, to me, the annual report is more for the landowner than the appraisal district. A lot of people don't do them simply because it's not required unless the appraisal district asks you to. But for me, it's more about the landowner than it is the appraisal district, because it's a receipt for me and evidence of what I did and proof of what I did that prior year. I like surprises as much as anybody, but I don't like surprises that can cost me my ag exemption. And a surprise like that at the end of the year, or God forbid the following year, where they go, hey, we want an annual report of all your activities this year, and I didn't record any of them, or I didn't keep up with that, that's not a pleasant surprise to me. That's something that I want to keep up with as I'm going. One of the best things to do is lean on us for that. We can help you with that. The annual report is a very reasonable service, and it's something that, we provide things like Dropbox folders for people to send their photos and documentation into if they want to. And that helps us keep better track of what you're doing so we can give suggestions and feedback. But you can sign up for an annual report, and we kind of follow it along through the year. We have specialists here, David Riley, incredible kind of annual report knowledge that he has. And our guys look at it. People treat us kind of like an accountant, where they have us review those things and look at them to make sure that before it ever goes to the appraisal district, it's in good shape. But again, whether it's for the appraisal district or not, my advice is to do one so you have those records. But lean on us if you need help. It's a picture of our team. It's an older picture, but that's, we've got a group of people here that are, interested in helping landowners. That's why we do these kind of things. That's why we're providing these. That's why we do our other webinars and seminars. And all these folks are interested in helping you have the best experience you possibly can in wildlife management. The better experience you have, the better it reflects on us, the better it reflects on wildlife management in general, and the more accepting and more and the easier the job for appraisal districts. I mean, let's face it, their job becomes a little harder when people go into wildlife management, because now they have to ask questions they didn't have to ask before. So the better we can all do, the easier their job is. So that's kind of the end of the presentation part of this thing. We're going to open it up to some questions now. I hope I haven't talked too long, Avalon. We'll get into this. And Avalon, I think you've got a couple questions, and she's going to help me with these. So appreciate everyone. Ask some questions, guys. Let's go.
So I did have a couple of last minute questions we weren't able to work in that came through on email. We'll start off with those and then open it up to the live Q&A. And just for those of y'all that may have joined late, I wanted to let you know you can submit your questions through the Q&A and chat options. You just scroll over your Zoom screen and there should be a toolbar that pops up at the bottom. Click on either the Q&A or the chat, and that should open up a separate pop-up box for you to type it directly in. So we'll get started here with the first question. I have a lot of Baccharis. Can you address best practices in getting rid of these weeds, particularly any ways to get rid of them that does not involve Roundup or other chemicals?
Yeah, so Baccharis, the scourge, or one of my favorite things. One of my first jobs here at Plateau, other than the treating fire ants, and I think it's kind of we have a couple I guess they're kind of weed out courses for our technicians to make sure they're going to stick with us kind of thing. One of them's treating prickly pear. The other one for me is treating Baccharis. I have treated more Baccharis. There's a place we drive through going to one of the properties that my kids go with me every time. And every time we go through there, I talk about this Baccharis job we did there. And it was incredible. It was the most overgrown bunch of Baccharis you'd ever seen. And we, knocked it out. And we did have to use poison to do it because it was such an extreme case. So we've controlled Baccharis here on our property in Dripping Springs simply by pulling it up every once in a while. If you pull it up just like mesquite, you pull it up by the roots, it's not going to come back. You can cut it back often enough that sooner or later it'll kind of stop growing too. I've had some success with that in small amounts. If you've got a big growth of Baccharis, it works like mesquite. I mean, you can cut it and it's going to come back with a vengeance. You have to either grub it up if you don't want to use chemicals, or there are chemicals that you can use. I'd suggest asking your biologist. I don't know the name of the chemical. I'm trying to remember what we use on it. I want to say it was Remedy, not Roundup. There's a chemical called Remedy that I want to say we used on willow Baccharis. It's bad stuff. A lot of people see it. It's one of the first things that come back after ground has been disturbed oftentimes. And sometimes it's the only green stuff you have in that area. And a lot of people will let it go for a while and then it'll just take over an area. So pay attention to it. Keeping up with it is the best way to control it. Is just if it starts, the young ones you can pull up sometimes, and that'll do it. So hopefully that answers your question. But I don't like using chemicals either, but sometimes with that kind of stuff, if you've got a bad infestation, you'll have to. We offer those kind of services too. We can help you with it. We use those chemicals very responsibly, and our guys know they know what they're doing with it. If you ever have a question about how to do that, and specifically, give your biologist a call, or call the office. Ask for Steve Parker. He can help too.
Awesome. Next question. I read an article about getting rid of tree stumps by using Epsom salts. Any thoughts on the effectiveness of this method?
No, I don't know. I think I read something about that as well. I think maybe the salts kind of help it deteriorate quicker, to get rid of tree stumps that way. I really don't have any feedback on that. I don't know anything about it. I know that anything you can do probably to make the tree stump absorb water more quickly, kind of thing, to where it does deteriorate and rot quicker. That'll, kind of help you get to a point that you can pull it out. Don't know that much about that.
Next question. My management plan has mosaic checkered under brush management. Could you elaborate on what this means in practice?
Sure. So mosaic just means not everything. If you think about a mosaic quilt or a mosaic painting, it's patchwork. It's a clump over here and a clump over here and a clump over there. So basically all that means is that you're going to do it in a less uniform manner. So I'm not going to go and just clear 5 acres of mesquite or 5 acres of cedar. I'm going to do it in a mosaic pattern. So in that 5 acres, let's say I've got a 5 acre treatment area. That's the designated amount that I have to do. I'm not going to cut it all. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to take out maybe just the ones that are 8 feet tall, or the ones that are, 4 inches round or whatever. So I'm going to pick and choose and do kind of it doesn't have to be a specific pattern, but it's going to be a patchwork type of thing, to where what you're doing by doing that is you're creating edge. You're not just creating a vast expanse of nothing, you're removing some, and maybe you're opening some holes, and you're opening some areas over here and opening an area in the back. And that's a mosaic. If you think about, having a patch of dense growth and a patch of open area, then a patch of dense growth and a patch of open area. So it really just means not being so uniform in the method. It gives you the opportunity to be creative and gives you some flexibility rather than saying, I'm going to, cut all the mesquite or all the cedar on this one area.
Great. Next question, could you please explain natural cavity development?
Natural cavity development? Yeah, natural cavity. So natural cavity development. I think one method of that, and I may be, again, I think I mentioned I'm not a biologist. In my view, natural cavity development would be leaving. So cavities are normally found in older, maybe trees that you would normally remove, maybe rotted, maybe dead trees, kind of thing. There's actually there's a method of supplemental shelter called snag development, where you're creating dead trees. So in an area that's densely wooded, you would go and you would girdle these trees, meaning, just cut along the bottom or cut along the trunk around it to where you're basically killing the tree. And what that does is creates a tree that's more likely to have a cavity in it. Maybe it's easier for birds to find a cavity, or it's easier for a woodpecker or something to make a hole in it, because it's going to get bugs and things like that in it. So it's going to be a tree that's easier to get a cavity. So really, there are different ways of doing that. Some of it's snag development, where you're actually creating trees, and some of it is just leaving existing dead trees where they are. And then that creates cavities. It creates those dead trees, get splits in them. They get cavities in them when the branches fall off, those kind of things. So those are things that birds would use. So that would be examples of natural cavity development.
Awesome. Next question, could you please talk about how best to do bird surveys?
So how best to do bird surveys? The best way to do a bird survey is to hire one of our guys, one of our birders or our biologists to do it for you. That's as far as bird surveys go, unless if you're a birder, and there are other people that do those. There are people with the Audubon Society, I guess, and Master Naturalist and things like that do bird surveys as well. A bird survey, though, is something that it just depends on what you want to get out of it, and whether you want it to be a qualifying activity or not. For me to just go out and do a bird survey on my property, I don't know enough birds to be able to say what they are. What's interesting about, when you have a real bird survey done is I may go out there, you or I may go out and see 5 or 10 species of birds that we recognize. One of our guys may go out there and they may hear 20 or 30. I've been on properties where they, 60 plus bird species, that they're hearing, not necessarily seeing. And it's phenomenal. And that's where you get a real understanding of what's on your property. So a real bird survey is done by someone who knows birds, who knows their sounds, because you're not going to see all of them. And it's done in a method where you cover the entire property based on kind of a hearing radius type of thing. It doesn't have to be that way, but I would hesitate to do a bird survey where I identify 3 or 4 species of birds or 4 or 5 species of birds and send that to the county and say that I've done an actual bird survey. You may combine that with other animals that you're seeing on your property. So call it just incidental counts. So going around your property and documenting the animals that you see. But a real bird survey would be something that, someone with some expertise in the birds' audible sounds and things like that I think would be more appropriate for a bird survey, let's say. I hope that answers that question. So the other thing about surveys is just, for me, the primary thing about if you're doing your own surveys, and none of these have to be done by a professional per se, but if you're doing your own surveys, just make sure that you have a method to it. Make sure that, you go out to your property and you visit certain spots that you feel like that's where I'm viewing these birds. And if you're documenting that carefully, that I was here for a matter of, however many minutes, and I documented this many species, and I went over here and I documented more, and I went over here and I documented more. And then you do that every year in the same manner, you're going to gain something from it. And remember I said earlier, if you feel like you're getting something out of it, if it feels, like it's providing something for your property, then you can feel pretty good about it being an acceptable activity. So, and then I would also say, call us and ask your biologist more about, kind of how you might do your own bird survey on your property. So, I'm going to try not to answer questions I don't know the answer to. I like to talk and I like to try to help as much as I can, but I will not make anything up. These are all things that I've done, and hopefully it's helpful to you.
Awesome. Next question. I am new to wildlife management, and I was wondering when I should start my activities.
So new to wildlife management, you can start them anytime. If you're new, as in 2020 new, you needed to have started them already. If you're new, as in 2021 is going to be your first year, then technically you don't have to start them until 2021. But we've done a lot of 2021 plans already this summer, and those folks can get started early. You can put out feeders, you can start hanging your nest boxes and doing other things. The activities themselves don't really start counting until next year, so don't do a lot of big things. Don't go out and clear a bunch of brush until next year, when it will be a qualifying activity type of thing. You can start hanging nest boxes and you can put a feeder out there, but if you go out and you fill that feeder right now, it doesn't apply to your wildlife management next year. So it's the activities that you do during that wildlife management year, during that calendar year. But it doesn't mean you can't get started. And if you're talking about 2020, if you're new in 2020, you need to get started. It's past the middle of the year. So it's kind of like me saying I'm in livestock and I haven't had cows on there. You need to get started with your activities. You can call us. We can help you out if you need it. But just start some of those activities, get them going. One of the mistakes a lot of people make is they don't want to start their activities until they hear from the county that they've been approved. Don't do that. Earlier in this thing, I mentioned that, wildlife management is just basically an alternative form of ag. For most counties, they don't need to approve anything. You're already in ag. It's an open space valuation is what it's called. So you're already in open space. You're just going to one other form of open space. And for them, there's really no reason to approve you. We follow up on all these and we'll make sure that you're approved, but usually you won't get a letter from the county. Most counties don't. Sometimes you will, but you usually won't hear from anybody that you've been approved. The only time if you hear something, it'll be that you've been denied. That's the thing you want to watch out for. And if we're doing your plan, you're not going to get denied. And if you do, we're going to help you with it, but you don't have anything to worry about. Don't wait until the county appraisal district calls you to start your activities. Get them started and get going.
All right. Next question. I purchased my property in April of this year. It had an ag exemption for cattle, but I terminated the grazing lease upon purchase. Do I qualify for continuation of the ag exemption through all of 2020? Will I need to show the appraisal district to justify the ag exemption?
Yeah, no, you'll qualify. And so the property's already in ag, in traditional ag for 2020. As long as the livestock are on there and like you said, you've got documentation, you cancel the grazing lease at a certain time, you're allowed to rest a property for a little while, you'll be fine. We can do a wildlife management plan anytime. So if you wanted to move it into wildlife and get started, we can do a plan for you anytime, or you can wait until early next year. We can sign you up now and we can remind you early next year so you don't forget, kind of thing. But yeah, no, you'll be fine for 2020. As long as you've got evidence that there were livestock on there. What you don't want to have happen is, when you get started, because you're going to have to file in 2021, you want to have some evidence that there were livestock on there in the last year, kind of thing. So what you don't want to have happen is if, the only thing that could ever get you is if there hadn't been, if maybe that place hadn't been grazed for many years and you went in and you filed in 2021 and you didn't have any evidence of a grazing lease or anything like that. So it sounds like you've got it under control. You're fine for this year. You can get a plan anytime you want to, or you can start with a wildlife management plan and kind of start moving towards wildlife management. It doesn't hurt you to start doing some of those activities this year if you wanted to do that. That way, if the county asks any questions, hey, I pulled the cows off in April. My intention was to move into wildlife management. In 2021, I started doing wildlife management activities as my ag use for the rest of the year. So if they have any questions, that'll answer them.
All right. Next question. Could you please show us an example of an annual report?
An example of an annual report. I wonder if I have an example that I can readily available. I don't know if I can do this without stop sharing this screen. So
I can write his name down.
Yeah.
So we can send him an email afterwards.
So here's the forms are on. I wish I could pull mine up, but I don't know how to do it and still keep this up here. Hang on one second. I may be able to do this. Shoot. It would take me forever to get to it. I'm sorry. I wasn't prepared for that. And we will think about that for a future one. But I can paint a picture. All right. There's a form that you use. It's on the Texas Parks and Wildlife website. And anytime you get an annual report is requested of you, you will get that, they'll send you a link to that form. It's a form that you fill out and it's basically a checkbox. I mean, these are your activities. It has all of them lined out and you check off what you did. The important thing about that is that you don't just check the boxes and write down what you did, that you provide some documentation. So my annual report, the way it looks is it's that form. It's a state form. Again, it's on the Texas Parks and Wildlife website. We can provide it for you. Most appraisal districts will have it as well. But it is a state required form. We go a little farther. We have kind of ours goes a little deeper than just the state form, but it is a state form you fill out. And then what I do at the bottom of mine, so each of the categories, let's say fire ant treatment. I'll give you an example here. Maybe this will paint a picture. So you get down to predator control. You check, okay, I did predator control. The first part of it is it has boxes for the different things you did: water, food, shelter, predator control, and you check those things off. And then each one of them has a segment where you provide your explanation of what you did. So you fill that out. Predator control. We treated fire ants on 10 acres of the property twice this year, once in May and once in October, kind of thing. And treated approximately 10 acres, used X amount of bait, blah, blah, blah. Spent, a couple hours walking an area and treating those fire ants. So I'll write down an explanation of what I did, a pretty detailed explanation to explain, kind of how much time I spent and what I thought I saw. There wasn't very bad infestation of fire ants. I'll talk about that. And then at the bottom of that, I'll write, see represented photos attached. And so then on the back of my report, I'll attach a document and the heading will be, for the different segments of my wildlife management plan. So this one will say predator control, and under it, I'll say fire ant treatment in 2020, October, and here's some pictures. And I'll have, 5 or 10 pictures, representative photos of what I did. And I may explain, what those pictures are. Here's the kids doing fire ant treatment using extinguished fire ant bait, on such and such a date. And then I'll have, so I'll provide that evidence. And for each of my activities, and that's what you do. We go down through that report and, here's the feeders. I filled feeders 4 times this year, used X amount of food, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll provide representative photos. I'll attach receipts or whatever else I have that documents my activities. So that's kind of, hopefully that paints a little bit of a picture. Sorry, I can't pull one up right now, but really it's a form. And the key to the difference in, anybody can do one. The key to, somebody that has us do it, we do about 800 of them, and we may do 1,000 of those this year, where people pay us just to basically like an accountant. Here's all my stuff. Y'all put it where it's supposed to go. And we help guide you through that, and we help, make sure we're getting good documentation from you. But we can check those first before they ever go to the appraisal district. That way, if somebody says I did fire ant treatment, but they don't have any photographs, they don't have any documentation, they just wrote down what they did, before we send that to the appraisal district, we'll call you and ask you for some photos, because that's what they want to see. They want to see real evidence. I remember when I turned my annual report this year, I remember I told y'all it was late. And when I talked to the appraiser, she said, yeah, just get it to me as soon as you can. And she said, Tim, please send documentation with it. Don't just send the report. She didn't want just to fill in the blanks. So I sent her all the documentation and everything was fine. But, anybody can say what they did. It's one thing to be able, if you can show it, then there's no way that anybody can ever ask questions. There's no way they can ever doubt it. And what we have to remember is that they get audited too. That's the thing to remember when you think about an annual report, is that the appraisal districts get audited too. They get asked, okay, what did y'all do this year? Why did you give Tim Milligan his ag exemption? Well, because he did this. Well, do you have any evidence of that? No. Well, then they look kind of stupid. So if I can provide them documentation, there's no question, no one can ask them questions and they won't ask me any. So that's kind of how that works.
Awesome.
Hopefully that painted a good enough picture. I'll send us an email if you want to see a picture of one. We can give you some examples, or hire us to do it for you.
Great. Next question. I actually had a couple come through about this. So this is our first year in Eco Lab. Is Plateau managing our land?
So at this point, no. You'll be in Eco Lab with Cassie Gresham, with the law firm Braun and Gresham. So we're not managing the land at this point. We did a habitat assessment, so we've been out there. We know a little bit about the land, but Cassie will take you through the Eco Lab process as far as getting you into ag, getting your ag exemption over a period of time. She'll work with you, and she'll work with the researchers who are doing research on the property to get that property into ag. So she'll handle all that process. You really won't have a whole lot of interaction with Plateau unless you can always ask us questions about what you're doing on your property. That's the other thing. We're a wildlife management company. We do this, in property tax consulting, we do all that. But people that just have questions about what they're doing and am I doing good things on my property? That's what we're here for. So you can always ask us questions, because you can get started on those wildlife activities, whether you're actually in wildlife or not. Then once you get through the Eco Lab program, that's when we'll kind of step back in. That's when our biologists will come out and do another site visit on the property and discuss all these activities we talked about, discuss what wildlife management will look like for you on your property going forward, so you know what you're getting into then. You don't have to do any of that stuff right now. You certainly can. We can do a wildlife plan for you, at any time you wanted to, and then we can file it when the time comes. So you can always get that information and get ahead of the game if you want to. But right now, we're technically not managing the land. And really, once you get into wildlife management, we do your plan for you. And then if you want to hire us and you want to use us to manage the property, we offer any, as far as consulting and conversations and answers to questions like this, that kind of stuff as you go on, without you paying for it necessarily. Is we can always answer questions for you and help you manage your land, or we can step in and do that for you. We have a lot of people that need that kind of help, and we're there for them. So.
Great. All right.
I'm glad to see some Ecolab folks.
I know. I was excited to see that too, that they joined us.
That's an important program, and it's a lot of times you go through that and you don't know exactly what you're getting into when you go forward. So it's good to see this information. Good.
For sure.
Sorry.
No worries. Next question: how many nest boxes per acre to satisfy shelter requirement?
Okie doke. That's going to depend on the region and the county that you're in. I want to say, east of 35, it's usually one per 5 acre. One nest box per 5 acre. Not east. I'm sorry. West of 35. West of 35, it's usually one per 5 acres. East of 35, it's a lot. I think a lot of times one per 3 acres. That should be in your wildlife management plan. So if you have a wildlife management plan with us, you should be able to go to that supplemental shelter section and look in there, and it should say exactly how many you need. If you don't, or if it's not in there, call either your biologist or call me, send me an email and tell me what county you're in, and I'll try to figure it out. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's usually one per 5 acres or one per 3 acres. My property is one per 5, and it's actually east of 35, so maybe farther east, one per 3. As you get into more, I think it's more treed areas, it ends up you have to have a few more. So I can't. Sorry.
Next question. We have had a group of red stag doe end up on our property, and they are emptying our protein feeders. I can't keep them full. Any suggestions? And will they keep the whitetail from coming to the feeder?
I would imagine, I don't know that they chase off whitetail. I would imagine they might. They're big animals. So one suggestion would be, hire a trapper and, have them removed, or let somebody come and dispatch of them if you wanted to, or hunt them or something. I don't know that you could fence off a feeder to keep a red stag out of it. I've got stories about a red stag running through a high fence on a property that I was working one time, and they just, they took about 20 yards of fence with them. Those are some big animals, and they're hardy. And I would imagine that just like an axis or any other bigger animal, they're gonna run the whitetail off the places. So I would try to do something to dispatch them or to get them off there. Anything you do, I mean, that's a form of habitat control. Controlling those exotic species. So again, it's a pretty specific question about that particular animal. I would encourage you to call either the region manager for your area and get with his biologist, kind of thing, to get a better answer for that. We have some contacts for trappers if you wanted to have them trapped and removed, kind of thing. The other idea is, whether feeding protein, if you want to keep feeding protein or not. Sometimes, just like the hogs on our place, we turned off all the feeders and they went somewhere else. Turn them back on full force, and they're going to come back. You turn off those protein feeders for a little while. Now, this isn't the time of year because you may be gearing up for hunting, but turn off those protein feeders for a little while at the right time, and those red stag may find their way off your property. So, hope that helps.
All right. Next question. We have 20 wildlife acres, and a neighbor wants to buy 2 acres that are next to their 2 unconnected properties, where they want to be contiguous and have their ag in all the properties. We don't need these 2 acres and are willing to sell as long as we don't jeopardize our wildlife management status with the county. Is there any considerations they should keep in mind?
There is. So when you subdivide a property like that, when a property gets smaller, it becomes subject to minimum acreage requirements. That's the only time minimum acreage requirements apply. So when a property gets smaller, it is subject to minimum acreage requirements. I would check with, you can call, whatever county you're in, if you want to send me an email, I can get you the right person, or if you want to call the office or call me, I can get you the right person. I would need to know what county you're in so I could tell you what those minimum acreage requirements are. Oftentimes they're 20 acres. So, it's good that you're asking that question. In some counties they're less. And there are ways that if you are going down below 20 acres, you can make it work. You can co-op with a neighbor kind of thing to technically put the two together for the county to where it doesn't seem like it's getting smaller. So that's a good question. It's definitely important in your instance with you being at 20 acres right now. So I'd encourage you to call us or send an email, and I'll get back to you and make sure that the right person answers that question for you for your county.
Next question, for future planning, what is the revised state law related to going from wildlife to regular ag? Is it a direct transfer process?
Okay, so the question is, what's the process for going from wildlife to traditional ag?
Yeah, and they're asking about what the revised state law is, if there's a direct transfer process.
I don't know the actual answer to that question. I might need to have have Shane or someone answer that question later. So our biologists are all registered property tax consultants, or not all of them, but most of them are registered our plan writing biologists, are registered property tax consultants. They would probably have a better answer to that question. I'm not sure that I fully understand it. I think if you mean direct transfer process, meaning can you go directly from wildlife management to traditional ag? Yes, you can. If that's the question you're asking, then that'll answer that question. You can go from wildlife management to traditional ag. It's all a 1D1 open space valuation is what you have. So whether you're in traditional ag, grazing, farming, ranching, whatever you're doing, baling hay, planting oats, whatever it is, you have a 1D1 open space valuation. When you go into wildlife management, you still have a 1D1 open space valuation. It's just you're managing native Texas wildlife instead of baling hay and fixing fences and feeding cows. So moving back is not a change necessarily. It's no different than me saying I'm going from cows to goats. So if that didn't answer your question, please please call me or email me at the office, and I'll get someone to answer it for you.
Awesome. So just getting started, what is the source of corrected feeders and other equipment?
So the source, there are lots of sources for feeders. Maybe that's you're asking for correct feeders, and we were having this conversation the other day, and I think there was someone under the impression that they had to have. I'd love to say you have to have one of our feeders, but you don't. There is no correct feeder necessarily. There are better feeders that are better for the purposes. All of our products. So if you go to our website and you go to our products page, we have feeders and water systems and everything designed to make wildlife management a little easier. But you can, any type of feeder that fits the criteria, meaning it's free choice. It's not on a timer. It's not spinning, and that it's feeding the right things. It's feeding something with protein as opposed to corn. Corn's a bait. It's not a supplement, so it doesn't count as supplemental food. Doesn't mean you can't feed corn, just means it won't be one of your qualifying activities. You can put, blocks of protein on the ground. There are bird blocks that they make now. We do a lot of quail feeders, turkey feeders, songbird feeders, and bird feeders, and use hen scratch, which has a high amount of protein, bird seeds kind of thing, or any kind of wild bird seed. But all of that, you can find a lot of that information on our website. You can certainly ask us and look in your plan. There should be some recommendations of types of feeders, meaning free choice or freestanding, and you want something that's got some predator control to it, predator guard to it, that's not going to get ravaged by raccoons if you don't, so you're not going through so much food type of thing. But so if you're looking for a resource or a source for it, I'd suggest our website, or just call somebody here and ask them about, hey, if you're looking at a feeder and it's not one of ours, call us and ask us, hey, is this an acceptable feeder? Is it something that's going to work? I went to a property one time a long time ago, and there were 6 different landowners, and they were all feeding. They got an annual report requested by the county, and they were all feeding corn out of these spin cast feeders, and none of it qualified. And so, the fact that they had us come over there and ask that question, they were able to modify those things and make them to where they were acceptable feeders.
Great.
Hopefully that helps.
And the last question I have on here, is it really necessary to treat cedar? I thought junipers are what is bad. I have really nice cedars and I want to keep them.
Yeah, no. So yes, that's a good question. Cedars, there's nothing wrong with cedar or juniper or anything. And in this area, cedar and juniper are pretty much, the same thing. Now there are some old growth cedars on some properties, I suppose, that you may be talking about, and those, of course, you don't have to control those. You don't have to control anything. There are people here that would tell you that you're better off leaving those junipers alone. That's good habitat. That's why that term mosaic comes in, because no one's saying that you need to clear all the cedar or all the juniper off your property. The best thing to do is to control it in some way, so where things don't get over infested there. That's like everything else. Um, like anything, in moderation, to where it's providing the right amount of cover. You don't want to clear all the cedar or all the juniper off of a hillside, because then you're going to have some major erosion problems type of thing. So those, and you're destroying habitat that may be appropriate for things like golden cheek warblers and other species that use those. So always ask before you do something on your property. One of our founders, Burl Armstrong, is prone to saying that, the mistakes we make on our properties are generational mistakes, or can be. And sometimes people will do things because they think they're doing the right thing, and they look up and they go, man, I've made a mistake that's gonna, that my family's gonna deal with, years from now. I know an example of a gentleman in Edwards County who talked to the appraisal district, and they basically told him that, he needed to do some brush management. And he asked them how much, and they said, well, based on your acreage and your plan and everything, you need to do 5 acres of brush management. You need to clear 5 acres of cedar. So he hired a guy with a bulldozer to clear 5 acres of cedar. And he called me. He said, Tim, I've got this big scab in my property now, and I hate it. It's just, I can see it from everywhere, and it's just this big void. He didn't realize he didn't have to do that. He needed to treat 5 acres. So he could have gone through there and just cleared, every 20th tree or whatever, or had some method to his madness to where he was opening it up some and treating that area. It's not about doing away with it. It's about treating it. Same with fire ants and anything else. It's about treating an area, not about, we're never going to get rid of fire ants, but we're going to treat that area for fire ants. We're going to try to control them in that area. And that's what you're doing with cedar or juniper or mesquite or willowbacchus or anything else. Invasive species like willowbacchus or mesquite and those kind of things. And yeah, you may want to eradicate those. Hogs, you want to eradicate those. You want to get rid of all of them you can. Native predators, if you have native predators, you want to control them if you have a native predator issue, native predator problem. That's a long conversation, but hopefully that answered your question. Is that, I don't know if we got any more, but that's
it. And
well,
actually,
good.
we're right on time today.
Well, yeah, we did good. We did good. Hey, I want to thank everybody again. Throwing this slide up here, and of course, y'all know on our website, Avalon's done a tremendous job. Thank you, Avalon, for, I wish I could see everybody on there and have everybody clap for you, but thank you so much for, doing this and helping put this together, because I think it's a great service. I hope y'all appreciate it, and you got something out of it. Remember our family of companies. We have a group of companies that we're all a part of. Our attorneys, our real estate group. We're here to provide services to landowners. And when I first started here, the thing that struck me is that this whole entire company was designed to help landowners protect their rights. And everything we do is designed to help a landowner get a little more out of their land, get a little more enjoyment, a little more reward, and to protect them and offer the assistance that they need. So remember our family of companies. Sign up for our newsletter. So go to the website, sign up for the newsletter. That link works too. Go to the website, sign up for the newsletter. It's great. Avalon helps put that thing together. She's taken it to kind of new heights. Has a lot of great information from our biologists and our technicians, and everyone in the company provides input for that. That it's a great resource. So I'll encourage you to do that. And then, again, just I hope you enjoyed this as much. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I like doing these. So, if you have any feedback for me, or if you have any questions, or if you have any, any criticism, anything, send it to me. My website or my email address is on there. Call me at the office. Just ask for Tim. They'll find me. But if you have any feedback or anything you'd like to see in future episodes, I guess we call them, let me know. And that way Avalon and I can take that into consideration. You can always call, and I'm sure Avalon will talk to you too. So, we love hearing about, hearing your feedback, and hopefully this thing did something for you. So again, appreciate everybody being here today. And if that's all we got, Avalon, I guess we're pretty much through, right?
Yep, that's it. Thank you guys. And just a reminder, I will be sending out this recording. I have this recorded for you, and I will send you an email. So you have this, and I can also send a copy of this PowerPoint. So all of these links that Tim has been pointing out, you can just directly click on them and get to what you need. So
Outstanding. Thanks, Avalon.
thank you, Tim. Y'all have a good
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.